Late in the morning on Monday, April 29th, 2024, Frank Platt and I met with a new client. Him and I were both excited to be working together again on this new project. We've worked together in the past through vCISO services. And this is just another great opportunity to work together. I always enjoy working with Frank. That evening, he was shot and killed in a senseless road rage incident in Memphis, Tennessee. Frank was a pillar of the information security community, but he was so much more. He was the kind of a person that almost instantly you formed a bond of friendship with. He'd go out of his way to help you, whether it be in information security, talking about risk management, helping folks on their career journey, talking about barbecue. It's difficult. And it's hard to process. It's hard to understand. Frank spoke with me on the Virtual CISO Moment, one of the first ones to bravely take the plunge in this new experiment that I was doing. He spoke with me almost exactly 2 years ago to the day, on May 2nd, 2022. And I want to share that with you as a remembrance and a tribute to Frank Platt. You fought the good fight. You finished the race. You have kept the faith. Mike Schaefer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. I'm here with Frank Platt of the InfoSec Alliance. Frank, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Greg.
So I'd like to start out to hear a little bit about I know you have an extensive background in information security and risk management, and I've known you for several years, but I'd like to hear about how you started out and what you're doing in InfoSec right now.
Well, sure. I started out in the telecom industry and moved over from that and we've had the fortune with a couple other guys to start an IT consulting group back when it wasn't even called IT. We didn't know what to call it. We didn't know if it was network consulting, software design, whatever it was. And in 2000, when we sold that, I found myself looking for something to do because I wasn't quite ready to retire. And one of the clients that we had worked with through Y2K, some people may remember that, some people don't. Some people thought it was a farce, and some people was. Anyway, it was an electrical utility company, a TVA distributor, and I had worked for them for probably 6 years. The company had, with their Y2K conversions. And I get a call from the executive VP, and she asked me to come meet with her. And I walk in, and we get to do our niceties, and I'm like, Marie, what do you want to see me about? And she points to her table, working table, and there's 3 inch-and-a-half 3-ring binders. And she goes, what are those? And I picked it up and opened it up. It said Tennessee Valley Information System Security Practices. And I said, well, Marie, these are Tennessee Valley Information System Security Practices. And she goes, Frank, don't be flippant with me. She goes, I can read. I'm like, well, Marie, I don't, what do you want me to say? I don't know what they are. And she goes, well, you have been around here for so long, and me and the board and the leadership trust you. Go figure out what that is. And I said, well, okay, that must be the next phase of my life, is to go figure out what information security is all about. Since that point in time, I guess one of the first things I learned is that there's a wealth, the security community, the cybersecurity community is a very close-knit group of people. I mean, we all know each other very well through the various associations such as ISACA and ISSA and InfoGuard and all of those. Well, that was my first Rolodex, was the ISSA. The ISSA had started a chapter in Nashville. I think I may have been like the 29th person. I don't know, there may be up to about 600 today. But I found that these guys were all information security experts, knew far beyond what I did. But I began tapping into their knowledge base and learning from them, kind of a ecosystem that started with grassroots. And I began learning that security, while I knew I knew the technology side of it, but what I knew was the availability. So I had 1/3 of the security down of that triad.
The triad, right? Yes.
Triad.
Security, availability, and integrity.
Confidentiality. And
Confidentiality.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you say it so many times. It's like it should roll off the tongue, but it doesn't. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I knew the availability. I've been doing that. I've been doing that most of my career. So all I really had to apply to that was a confidentiality and integrity to it. Considering that I am not a heavily technical guy. In fact, if any of my family members call me for tech support, my standard answer is, "Did you reboot it?" I don't care what the device is, right? I don't care if it's a phone or a computer. And if the answer is yes, we've tried that, then my next response is, well, here's the 800 number to the Geek Squad. Give them a call.
Yeah, I used to joke that my VCR, I couldn't get it to stop blinking 12 o'clock. And the two embedded things there was like, first of all, I don't know how to program my VCR. And second of all, I still am using a VCR. Now, in all transparency, I haven't used a VCR probably in about 5 or 6 years now. But, you know, even 5 years ago, it was still amazing that somebody was using it.
I know. Well, I still have a VCR, but I'm not sure where it is anymore, right?
It's probably blinking 12 somewhere.
Right, blinking. That led me into, well, if I'm going to be in the security field, and security field is, I guess it's probably can be considered 3 various classifications. There's an architectural track, there's a management track, and then there's the engineering track, which is more technical than the other two. Having said that, I chose the management and architectural side versus the engineering side. I figured that there's a lot of smart people that are doing a lot of good things already that on the availability component. And what I've learned over the years is that still holds true today. There's, in my opinion, there should be no reason that any cybersecurity guy should actually be turning a keyboard or anything of that nature, other than maybe the monitoring that has to happen. So that brought me into that world. Since that point in time, I've been fortunate to get drug in from a management perspective. And I think my management skills, my undergrads in Memphis, I went to Knoxville, UT for an MBA, and I've gone through a bunch of management training in the past, public speaking. I think I had to do that because I had a speaking engagement, and afterwards a guy came up to me and he goes, "You just murdered the heck out of that," and put me down into a speaking engagement or a public speaking role. But I think that being able to communicate and translate between the technology and the business side of it has been important to me most of my life. And that's where most of my projects are, to be able to understand what the business requirements are and then align those business requirements into a security practice that does it through a risk reduction. Everything being risk, and we talked about that a minute ago. So that led me into starting a company. I ended up with some employees, and in 2008, I sold that company off to a group that was a data center that wanted to surround themselves with security, and they bought my company and my people and hired me on as their first CISO. And of course, 2008 hit, and they had no customers. They had a great data center, but most of the customers bailed on it. So I ended up disconnecting myself from that group. I'm still friends with the founders of it. But it brought me into a realization that I don't need employees. That's something that I don't do a good job of. I'm not a good employer manager. And in fact, I remember with Cottonwood, when we had to hire an HR person, I'm like, oh my gosh, HR is risk reduction, and they're very, very well needed in the larger organizations. So in the past 10 years now, 12 years, most of my projects have been to go in and help companies understand what their risk exposure is, understand what their security posture is, and then begin helping them build a roadmap into improving that security posture and reducing those risks, and then helping them implement those roadmaps. That's kind of what I do today.
So, assuming you work with all different size companies, or mainly small and medium sized businesses, or?
I have worked for small and medium-sized companies. I've worked for larger enterprises, and I do kind of have a passion to work for the smaller organization because they are the ones that have the hardest time.
So what would you say with all that extensive experience working with them and seeing how risks and how to achieve risk reduction over the years has probably evolved? What would you say today is maybe the top risk that you see among your folks, your small businesses that you work with, small and mid-sized businesses?
Well, I think it's not just a security risk. I think among small businesses, it's a risk across the board, and that's lack of capital.
Ah, okay.
Um, and maybe not necessarily lack capital, with a lack of understanding how to allocate that capital so that you are protecting your investments way beyond what you might ordinarily need if you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur that has a startup going on and doesn't quite know how to go to that next level that's needed. So other than that is basically disciplines, hygiene. I know that's a big word out there, but what is an organization actually trying to do, and what is its core value to the world, and what am I doing to protect those core values for the world? I mean, I'm sure the business has business interruption insurance. There's probably key man insurance on the key people that are in the organization out there. They may have had a program that says first right of refusal. How do I exit out of this? All those strategies, but I don't see anyone ever addressing securing their assets in those strategies from a cyber standpoint.
You know, it's interesting that you say that about that, and then to combine that with your first statement about capital or how to use it, because I know one thing that I've seen, and you may or may not have seen something similar, where you'll have your SMBs, they'll subscribe to these security services like SOC as a service, that sort of thing, or they'll have the monitoring service, or maybe they'll even do it in-house. They'll bring in a nice tool that the salesperson has said does all these things, blocks all this stuff, and slices bread and all that stuff. And yet the effectiveness is diminished almost to the point of uselessness, because they've spent all the resources on the tool or the subscription, but not actually on having the resources, the personnel to action on the items that are coming out of there. Do you see something like that?
All the time. Almost, and that's not just limited to the small company. I've seen large multinational organizations that will spend a huge sum of money on the tool, but they won't necessarily spend or don't understand that they need to spend an equal amount of money on the implementation, how to actually set this up. They turn to rely on their internal resources to that. They say, hey, we got an IT team, they should be able to do it. But what they may not understand is that investment is maybe akin to a hospital deciding to put a new floor on the new wing out there. They're not going to turn their internal staff to build that hospital. They're going to turn out to an architectural group. They're going to turn out to engineers. They're going to turn out to subject matter experts to be able to actually help that. And once it's built, then it gets turned back over to the normal.
Yeah, and that's an unfortunate aspect, I think, of sometimes the desire for the C-suite and the board of directors to just want to make security issues go away. But I want to switch gears here for a moment. And right before we started, we were talking a little bit about CMMC and that certification. I'd love to hear a brief overview of your journey through that and what your thoughts are for the future of that.
Okay. Well, let's start from let's start from its genesis. Years ago, Congress passed an act called the FISMA-FIBS. And if you were a DOD department, or if you were a prime subcontractor, you had to go through FISMA-FIBS certification, which is security certification. In fact, you had to have a CISSP to be able to certify that. They couldn't enforce that on the private organizations out there, so it was a voluntary certification. I think the DoD realized in the past couple of years that even though they have this self-certification, that somehow or the other, all of our secrets are being leaked out to our to other companies. I won't say other countries. I'm not going to call them adversarials. I'm just saying they're out there. And for example, if you look at the Chinese version, I mean J-22 aircraft they have out there, it's an exact replica of our F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. So those secrets were getting leaked out, and they were getting leaked out not necessarily through an intrusion of I'm going to go steal all the documents, which they would, but how did they get in there? And the advanced persistence threats, they're just continually looking, and they can piece information together from all the different industrial base out there to be able to say, this is going to happen, and this is how it is, and that's how I target my attack. So in response to that, they realized that they had to be a better way for our defense industrial base. And anybody that's in, I mean, you know, if you're building a heads-up display for whatever you're in that DIB, there had to be a better way for the DIB to show that they were doing what needed to be done in the basic hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a certification model, and the CMMC is an acronym for Cybersecurity Model Maturity Model Certification, which basically means you're doing something in your environment out there. What is it, and how mature are you in the practices? And is it an ad hoc environment where you react to something, or has it been somewhat industrialized into the everyday practice of the company? So the attempt is to let's secure the defense industrial base. And if you're not CMMC certified, then you're not going to do business with the DoD, as they've just let that go out there. And they created a whole new classification of data. They call it confidential unclassified information, which basically they don't want leaked out, but it doesn't have a classified or a secret level. So therefore, it doesn't have the controls on that information that those other two levels might have. It's interesting that the ecosystem that they have developed is considerably different from what I've seen of any of the other compliance models or certification models, and that you have a registered practitioner team that can act as consultants to help an organization prepare for a assessor to come in. But the assessor cannot be the group that helps you do the consulting to pick it up, or can the consultant be the group that assesses you? So it's two distinct companies that they put into play. One of them is a registered practitioner or the registered practitioner organization. I'm an RP, that was where I chose with my practice. Or you can be a certified third-party assessor. They call it a C3 APO. I have difficulty with that.
Yeah, I always go with C3PO and R2D2.
But they have C3 APOs are basically organizations that heretofore may have been auditors, although they don't like to call it auditing. But there's a lot of them that are coming up, and the process they have to go through to get certified themselves is pretty significant. And I think even though this has been going on for about 2 years now, there's currently only 8 or maybe 9 CA3POs. So it's a maturing model. In the meantime, they've kind of modified their whole plan where if you're going to handle any classified or confidential unclassified information, then you have to be at least at a level 1. And a lot of companies are already there, but they've never had to really attest to it. They've always assumed that they were there. So that's what that's all about.
And do they actually now, I might be a little bit behind on this, but is there an actual CMMC, I guess if you say CMMC certification, it's kind of like saying ATM machine, but is there actually a certification out there now, or is that still in the not so distant future? Meaning, can someone come in and audit and present you with just like a SOC 2 report or something like that?
Yes. They've they remodeled it. CMMC2 is what they're calling it today.
Mm-hmm.
CMMC1 had 5 levels of certification. They decided they didn't need 5, so they knocked it down to 3. Levels 2 and level 3 are still going through the process of what is actually does that mean. Level 1's pretty well determined now. So you can actually get a CMMC level 1 certification today.
Okay. Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily, and the level 1 only is, they only address what's called the federal contracting information language. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to, and this, by the way, this is mandated by 2026. Any company in that defense industrial base that wants to stay in that defense industrial base will have to be CMMC certified. So they've given, it's not an immediate thing, but as of 2026, if you haven't been CMMC level 1, then you won't even get the opportunity to review a contract.
Ah, I see. So you actually have to have that certification for level 1 by 2026 in order to be able to bid. Sort of like, I guess this all replaced a lot of the self-attestation for NIST 800-171 at some point in time.
No, actually, 171 is the actual document that they refer back to quite a bit on the level 2, which is when level 2 is now when I hit that CUI, that control.
Oh, okay. So level 1 is less than 171. Okay.
Right. I think 171 has like 15 controls in it that they address, where level 1 only has maybe 6.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's sometimes, it's so fluid and it's very hard to keep up. You got so many different standards out here, so many different frameworks, so many different audit types. I know I was just on a call where we're with a client, we're finishing up with a SOC 2, and then we're going straight into ISO 27001 as well as CSA star. And it's like, my goodness, it gets to be very stressful. And sometimes you just got to step away from InfoSec. Obviously, you don't want this to be your entire life. And here comes the softball question, Frank, because I know what your answer is going to be. But in your spare time, what is a hobby that you really, really dig into that you're really hungry about, that keeps you balanced in the InfoSec world?
Well, Greg, I have to tell you, I've barbecue.
I'm so surprised. Well, I've known that for some time. I have never partaken in any of your creations. But how did you get involved with barbecuing? I mean, you don't usually see barbecue and InfoSec married together. I mean, well, from a preparation standpoint, from an eating standpoint, definitely you do.
Well, it's interesting you would say that, because there's a lot of similarities in it. In fact, if you were to go out and talk to your security people or even your IT people, that most of them have a barbecue grill, and most of them like to barbecue. And I think the reason they do is because most people in this industry are process driven. They like to see a start and they like to see a finish. When you think about taking a shoulder, you gotta prep it. You got to make sure your fire is just right, not too high, not too low. You got to keep it on there the right amount of time, not too little, not too long. If you put the appropriate amount of rubs and you pay attention to it, what you end up with is a very good tasting piece of meat. Well, if you pay attention to the same in the cybersecurity field, or the IT field for that matter, if you do all your pre-planning, you prep everything, you get everything ready, you go implement, and then you enjoy, you have a very good, secure environment you walk through. So a lot of similarities to that. But to answer your question, how I got into it, I have a good friend, a gentleman named Kerry Bringle, and I've known Kerry for probably about a part of 30 years now. And Kerry had a desire to open a barbecue restaurant in Nashville for a long, long time, but he had a barbecue team. And I got invited to join that team probably 20 years ago. And that team travels around to a couple of different competitions. The primary one is in Memphis in May.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'll be there this May, I think it's May 12th through the 14th. And it just became such a passion of meeting all the pit masters and all the chefs that come in and out of that. And we party like rock stars for the first couple of days in Memphis, but then everybody gets really, really serious on Friday because the competition has to be turned in on a Saturday. Well, to further that, I guess I had a good friend that's a civil engineer in town, and we were in Memphis and we were watching that big old mighty Mississippi flow down and watching all the barges and all that traffic that goes along with that. And he said, Frank, we need to do one of these festivals in Nashville. And to hear him tell it today, I was probably the only one out of 30 other people that he had talked to that didn't say, are you crazy? What are you even talking about? I basically said, well, that sounds fun. So let's go do it. So in 2008, we started the Music City Barbecue Festival. It's no longer something that gets done today, but we would bring in 120 to 150 teams into downtown Nashville on First Avenue and put up music. And we'd party with what we would consider 35,000 of our closest friends. And as a result of that, I've been told a couple of times by people like Kerry Bringle, Pele Porker is his barbecue team down the Gulch. It's his team as well, Pat Martin with Martin's Barbecue and some of the other more famous pitmasters around that really I was the barbecue festival was kind of the genesis for the barbecue explosion in Nashville. I would venture to say no, I can't take that credit other than being probably stupid enough to go sink a bunch of money into a very fun event that I wish the city had not run us out of the downtown area. But once we lost the downtown area, we kind of lost momentum on the event out there. So that's also how I got to be known as that's where my barbecue comes into place, which I think you were alluding to earlier anyway.
Oh, absolutely. And so everybody, like so many people in Nashville now have you to thank for their addiction to excellent barbecue. So, well, Frank, listen, I really appreciate you joining us today. I have to say, while you were talking about the barbecue, I have to think now about maybe we might have to start thinking about replacing risk heat maps with maybe risk shoulder maps where, like, high risk is like raw and like, I don't know what overdone would be. I mean, that would be a high risk too. I mean, right in the middle, a nice medium rare, that's where I like stuff. But
think about the last time you had bad barbecue, right?
Yeah, exactly. Never. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Some really great information on CMMC, and for everybody else, stay secure.